The rival lawyer couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the man cleaning dog kennels at the animal shelter. The same hands that once signed million-dollar contracts were now gently washing abandoned puppies. Standing there in worn jeans and a volunteer t-shirt was Manhattan's most feared corporate attorney, the man who had destroyed her career 5 years ago and vanished from the legal world. Without explanation, welcome to the Human Stories. Before we dive into this incredible tale of redemption and the price of conscience, tell me in the comments, have you ever made a choice that completely changed your life's direction? And if you believe that true justice sometimes means walking away from everything you've built, hit that subscribe button and help us share stories that matter. The Pine Street Animal Shelter had never seen a volunteer quite like Michael. He arrived every morning at 6 a.m., an hour before the official opening, and stayed until well after closing time. His movements were precise and efficient, the kind of methodical approach that spoke of someone accustomed to handling complex situations. What set Michael apart wasn't just his work ethic or the way he could calm even the most aggressive rescue dogs with a gentle touch. It was his eyes, intelligent, haunted, and carrying the weight of someone who had seen both the pinnacle of professional success and the depths of moral failure. At 55, Michael moved through the shelter with the quiet confidence of someone who had found his purpose after years of searching. His graying hair was always neat, his volunteer uniform always clean, and his attention to detail was remarkable. He knew every animal by name, every medical condition, every behavioral quirk that needed special attention. The other volunteers respected him immensely. He never talked about his past, never mentioned what he did before coming to the shelter 3 years ago. All they knew was that he had a way with the most traumatized animals, as if he understood their pain on a level that went beyond professional training. But every Saturday afternoon, Michael would take a break from his duties and walk the 6 blocks to Central Park, not to exercise or relax, but to sit on a specific bench overlooking the playground where families gathered with their children and pets. He would sit there for exactly 1 hour, watching the joy and innocence he had forgotten existed in the world. It was on one of these Saturday afternoons that Sarah Chen, a 42-year-old environmental lawyer, decided to take her rescue dog to the park. Sarah was stressed about an upcoming case, her mind preoccupied with depositions and legal strategies. As she walked past the bench, something made her glance at the man sitting there. The profile was older, softer somehow, marked by lines that spoke of sleepless nights and hard-won wisdom. But the posture was unmistakable. The straight back, the hands folded in that particular way she remembered from countless courtroom battles. "Michael," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible above the sounds of playing children. The man on the bench looked up, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Recognition flickered across his features, followed immediately by something that looked like resignation. "Michael Harrison," Sarah said louder, her heart pounding. "My God, it's really you." The man who had been known simply as Michael for the past 3 years slowly stood up, his movements careful and deliberate. "Hello, Sarah," he said quietly, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone she remembered from their fierce legal battles. Sarah stared at the man who had once been her greatest professional rival, the corporate attorney who had made her question whether she was cut out for the legal profession. Michael Harrison, the senior partner who had built his reputation on winning cases that others considered unwinnable, was sitting alone in a park on a Saturday afternoon. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "What are you doing here? I heard you left Harrison Blake and Associates, but no one knew where you went." Michael's jaw tightened, the same expression he used to wear when facing a particularly challenging cross-examination. "I've been right here, Sarah, trying to find a way to live with myself." The last time Sarah had seen Michael was in the federal courthouse in 2018. He had been representing Meridian Chemical Corporation in a class action lawsuit involving groundwater contamination that had affected thousands of families. Sarah had been working pro bono for the plaintiff's side, fighting for families whose children had developed cancer from drinking poisoned water. Michael had won that case. His brilliant legal maneuvering had gotten the chemical company off on a technicality, saving them hundreds of millions in damages. The families got nothing except mounting medical bills and the knowledge that their children's suffering would go uncompensated. After the verdict, Michael had seemed triumphant. He had shaken hands with his corporate clients, accepted their congratulations, and returned to his corner office in the sky. Sarah had watched him from across the courtroom, wondering how someone could celebrate victory when children's lives hung in the balance. 6 months later, he had disappeared from the legal world entirely. "Michael, please," Sarah said, reaching out instinctively before stopping herself. "Talk to me. What happened?" Michael looked around at the families in the park, at the children playing with their dogs, at the world that had continued spinning while his own had fallen apart. "You want to know what happened? You want to understand why I'm here?" Nodded, unable to speak. "Walk with me," Michael said, picking up a small backpack that Sarah now realized contained dog treats and toy animals. They walked in silence for several blocks, moving away from the park toward a neighborhood Sarah didn't recognize. Michael led her to a modest building with a simple sign: Pine Street Animal Shelter. "Do you remember the Morrison case?" Michael asked suddenly as they stood outside the shelter. Sarah frowned, searching her memory. "Morrison, the pharmaceutical case from 2017. Dr. Jennifer Morrison," Michael said quietly. "She was the whistleblower who tried to expose the side effects of Zenithal before it went to market. My job was to discredit her testimony to make sure Global Pharma could launch their new antidepressant without delay." Sarah felt a chill as she remembered the case. "Michael, I remember that case. But what does this have to do with—" "She had a daughter." Michael cut her off. "Emma Morrison, 8 years old. Bright, curious, loved animals more than anything in the world. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up." Michael's voice grew quieter. Dr. Morrison was fighting so hard to warn people about Zenithal's effects on children because she had seen the preliminary data. She knew what the drug could do to developing minds. She was trying to protect kids like Emma. Sarah was beginning to understand, but she didn't want to hear what came next. "I destroyed her credibility," Michael continued, his voice steady but his hands trembling slightly. "I dug up her personal struggles, her divorce, her brief bout with depression. I made her look unstable, unreliable. I convinced the jury that she was a disgruntled employee seeking attention." Michael's voice cracked slightly. "Zenithal launched on schedule. Global Pharma made billions. And 18 months later, the first reports started coming in about increased suicide rates among teenagers taking the drug." Sarah felt sick. "Michael, that wasn't your fault. You were just doing your job, was I?" Michael turned to face her, his eyes blazing with the intensity she remembered from their courtroom battles. "I got a call from Dr. Morrison's lawyer in December 2018. Emma had been prescribed Zenithal for anxiety. She was 10 years old. Sarah, 10 years old. And she took her own life because of a drug I helped push through the system." The words hung between them like a physical weight. Sarah stared at Michael. "Dr. Morrison called me herself," Michael continued. "She was barely able to speak through her tears. She said Emma had been asking about the animals at the shelter they used to volunteer at together. She said her daughter's last words were about hoping the abandoned animals would be okay." Michael's voice broke completely. "I was in my office when she called. Sarah, do you know what I was doing? I was celebrating. We had just won another case, another victory for another corporation that they didn't care about the people they were hurting. I was drinking champagne while a mother was planning her daughter's funeral." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Michael, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. None of us did," Michael said simply. "That's the problem with what we do. We fight so hard to win that we forget there are real people on the other side of every case. Real families, real children." He gestured toward the shelter. "This is where Dr. Morrison and Emma used to volunteer together. After the funeral, I came here to... I don't know what I came here to do. To apologize, maybe. To try to understand what Emma had loved about this place." Michael opened the door to the shelter, and Sarah followed him inside. The sounds of barking dogs and mewing cats filled the air, along with the gentle voices of volunteers caring for the animals. "The first day I came here, I met a dog named Charlie," Michael continued. "He had been abandoned by his family when they moved away. He was old, sick, and so scared that he wouldn't let anyone touch him. The volunteers said he would probably have to be put down because he couldn't be adopted in his condition." Michael led Sarah to a quiet corner where an elderly golden retriever was sleeping peacefully in a comfortable bed. "I spent hours with him, just sitting nearby, not trying to touch him or force him to trust me, just being present. It took 3 weeks before he let me pet him, Michael said, his voice full of wonder. And when he did, when he finally trusted me enough to let me help him, I understood something that I had forgotten during all those years of fighting legal battles. Sarah looked at the peaceful dog, then back at Michael. What did you understand? That healing takes time, that trust has to be earned, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be present for someone who's been hurt. Michael knelt down beside Charlie, and the old dog's tail wagged weakly. Charlie lived for 6 more months after that. He wasn't alone when he died. Sarah was quiet, beginning to understand the transformation she was witnessing. I realized that I had spent my entire career fighting for the wrong side, Michael continued. I had been so focused on winning, on proving I was the smartest person in the room, that I had forgotten why I became a lawyer in the first place. Why did you become a lawyer? Sarah asked. Michael smiled sadly. Because I wanted to help people. Because I believed in justice. Because I thought the law was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. He stood up and walked to a window overlooking the shelter's play area, where volunteers were exercising dogs and socializing cats. Somewhere along the way, I lost that. I started measuring success by billable hours and case victories instead of by the lives I was supposed to be improving. So you just ... walked away. I tried to go back, Michael said, for about 6 months. After Emma's funeral, I tried to return to my old life. But every time I walked into a courtroom, all I could see was that little girl who loved animals. Michael turned back to Sarah. Of a system that treated human suffering as a cost of doing business. So I quit. I donated most of my savings to organizations that support pharmaceutical safety research and families affected by prescription drug side effects. And you came here? I came here to volunteer, Michael said simply, to try to do something that actually mattered. To help creatures that couldn't help themselves the way I should have been helping people all along. Sarah looked around the shelter, taking in the sight of her former rival, the man who had once been Manhattan's most feared corporate attorney in his element. What do you do here? Michael's face lit up with genuine joy for the first time since their conversation began everything. I clean kennels. I socialize animals. I help with medical care. I work with potential adopters. But most importantly, I work with the traumatized animals, the ones who have been abused, neglected, or abandoned. Like Charlie, Michael confirmed. Animals who have lost their trust in humans. Animals who need someone to be patient with them, to show them that not all people will hurt them. Sarah was amazed. You're still practicing law. You're just representing different clients now. In a way, yes, Michael agreed. I'm advocating for creatures who can't speak for themselves. I'm fighting for their right to be loved, to be safe, to have a second chance at happiness. Michael's voice grew stronger as he talked about his work. Last month, I helped a dog named Rex, who had been used in illegal fighting rings. He was so aggressive that most people thought he was beyond help. But I spent weeks working with him, helping him learn to trust again. He was adopted by a family with teenagers who needed a companion animal for their son with autism. 2 weeks ago, I worked with a litter of kittens who had been abandoned in a cardboard box during a snowstorm. They were so young they couldn't even eat solid food yet. I bottle-fed them every 2 hours for 3 weeks until they were strong enough to be adopted. Sarah could see the passion in Michael's eyes. You're just doing it differently now. Real justice, Michael agreed. Not corporate justice or legal technicalities, but actual fairness. These animals deserve love and safety, and I can provide that. I can make sure they get the second chances that I helped deny to so many people in my former life. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the volunteers work with the animals. Finally, Sarah asked the question that had been nagging at her. Michael, do you ever regret it? Do you ever miss your old life? Michael was quiet for a long moment. I miss the intellectual challenge sometimes. I miss the feeling of solving complex problems. I miss the adrenaline rush of a difficult case. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I don't miss the person I was. I don't miss waking up every morning and having to find new ways to justify helping corporations hurt people. I don't miss the guilt that kept me awake at night. Michael turned to face Sarah directly. I sleep well now, Sarah. For the first time in decades, I sleep peacefully. because I know that everything I did today made the world a little bit better instead of a little bit worse." Sarah was quiet, absorbing everything she had heard. "What can I do? How can I help?" "You can remember that every case you take affects real people," Michael said. "You can ask yourself whether you're fighting for justice or just for victory. You can remember that the law is supposed to be about protecting the vulnerable, not about protecting the powerful from consequences. But more than that," Michael continued, "you can remember that it's never too late to change course. It's never too late to ask yourself whether you're using your talents to make the world better, or just to make yourself richer." Sarah pulled out her business card and wrote her personal phone number on the back. "Michael, I want to help. Maybe there's a way I can use my environmental law background to support what you're doing here." Michael took the card and studied it. Sarah Chen, environmental justice attorney. He looked up with a genuine smile. "You're still fighting the good fight." "I'm trying to," Sarah said. "But seeing you here, seeing what you've chosen to do, it makes me want to do more." Michael walked over to a bulletin board covered with photos of successfully adopted animals. "You know what I've learned in the past 3 years? I've learned that success isn't about winning cases or making money. It's about the lives you touch and the difference you make." He pointed to a photo of a beautiful German shepherd with a happy family. "This is Luna. She was rescued from a puppy mill, traumatized and afraid of everything. It took months of patient work to help her trust humans again." Michael moved to another photo. "This is Oscar, a cat who was found with severe injuries after being hit by a car. The veterinary bills were enormous, but we found donors who believed every life was worth saving. Every single one of these animals has a story of pride. Every single one represents a life that was saved, a family that was completed, a second chance that was given." Sarah looked at the dozens of photos, each one representing a victory that had nothing to do with legal briefs or corporate profits. "You're still winning cases. You're just fighting for clients who actually deserve your help. The most deserving clients I've ever had," Michael agreed, as they walked back toward the shelter's entrance. Sarah noticed how the other volunteers interacted with Michael. They clearly respected him, sought his advice, and genuinely cared about his opinion. To ask, "Dr. Morrison's daughter, Emma, do you think she would approve of what you're doing?" Michael stopped and looked back at the shelter, at the animals being cared for and the volunteers working to make their lives better. "I think Emma would understand that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in courtrooms. Sometimes they're fought right here, with patience and kindness and the belief that every life has value." He pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a photo. It was a drawing that had been sent to the shelter by a young adopter, a crayon picture of a little girl hugging a dog. "Emma loved to draw pictures just like this," Michael said softly. "Pictures of children and animals being happy together. I think she would be proud that her story led to something that helps other children find that same joy." As Sarah walked back to her car, she couldn't stop thinking about the transformation she had witnessed. Michael Harrison had been one of the most successful lawyers in the city, but he had given up everything to become something far more valuable, a person who could sleep peacefully at night. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself thinking constantly about Michael's words. She began to evaluate her own cases differently, asking herself not just whether she could win, but whether winning would make the world a better place. She also began volunteering at the Pine Street Animal Shelter, working alongside Michael to help traumatized animals learn to trust again. She discovered that the skills she had developed as a lawyer, patience, attention to detail, the ability to advocate for those who couldn't speak for themselves, were perfectly suited to animal rescue work. A month later, Sarah was working with a rescue cat named Whiskers when she noticed a familiar figure walking through the shelter's front door. It was James Morrison, Dr. Jennifer Morrison's former colleague, carrying a small dog carrier. "I heard about the work you do here," he said to Michael. "I have a dog who needs help. She belonged to a family that lost their home to foreclosure. They couldn't keep her, and she's been traumatized by the separation." Michael opened the carrier and gently lifted out a small terrier mix who was shaking with fear. "What's her name?" "Emma," James said quietly. The family named her Emma. Michael's hand stilled for just a moment, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes. Then he cradled the small dog against his chest and spoke to her in the same gentle voice he used with all the frightened animals. "Hello, Emma," he said softly. "You're going to be okay. We're going to take good care of you." As Sarah watched Michael work with the traumatized dog, she realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just a career change or a midlife crisis. This was a man who had found his true calling, who had discovered that real success wasn't about accumulating wealth or winning cases, but about healing broken spirits and giving hope to those who had lost everything. Over the following months, Sarah watched Michael work with Emma, the dog, patiently helping her overcome her fear and trauma. The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. They were both healing from their past mistakes, learning to trust again, finding ways to turn their pain into something positive. Eventually, Emma was adopted by a family with a young daughter who had been asking for a pet. The little girl promised to love Emma forever, and Sarah saw Michael smile with genuine joy as he watched them leave together. "Do you think she knows?" Sarah asked as they watched the family drive away. "I think she knows she's loved," Michael replied. "And sometimes that's enough." Years later, when Sarah had left her corporate law firm to start a practice focused on environmental justice and animal rights, she would still volunteer at the Pine Street Animal Shelter every weekend. She would work alongside Michael, who had become the shelter's most valued volunteer and unofficial coordinator of their trauma rehabilitation program. And Michael would still be there, day after day, proving that heroes don't always wear expensive suits or work in corner offices. Sometimes they wear volunteer t-shirts and spend their days cleaning kennels and bottle-feeding orphaned kittens. Sometimes they give up everything they thought they wanted to become everything they were meant to be. The man who had once been Manhattan's most feared corporate attorney had found something more valuable than any legal victory. He had found redemption. He had found peace. He had found a way to use his gifts in service of those who needed him most. And every day, as he worked with traumatized animals who had lost their trust in humanity, he was reminded that healing was possible, that second chances were real, that it was never too late to become the person you were meant to be. The transformation was complete. The corporate lawyer had become an animal savior, not because he had to, but because he finally understood what justice really meant. True justice wasn't about winning cases or protecting corporate profits. It was about protecting the vulnerable, healing the broken, and giving hope to those who had lost everything. And in a world that often valued success over significance, Michael Harrison had chosen to measure his life not by what he had achieved, but by what he had given up to become something better. The man who had once destroyed lives in pursuit of legal victories now spent his days saving lives in pursuit of something far more valuable, the knowledge that every creature, no matter how small or broken, deserved love, care, and a second chance at happiness. Have you ever met someone who completely changed their life to align with their values? Someone who gave up success to find significance? Share their story in the comments below. Because here, at The Human Stories, we believe that the most powerful transformations happen when we choose conscience over career, when we choose service over success. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you to think differently about what it means to be successful, subscribe to our channel and help us share more stories of people who chose to make a difference instead of just making money. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be.